Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel Tour update. And as we mark today, day 564 since October 7th of 2023 occurred when the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates launched their heinous onslaught on southern Israel, perpetrating murder, massacre of some 1,200, mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping some 250 people, including men, women, children, infants, as well as elderly, and 59 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. Now, Hamas has rejected the latest outline that was proposed by Israel in collaboration and coordination with the Egyptian mediator, with the United States, and others. And on that, we are now in a situation where Israel is, in response, intending to intensify its various military activities in the Gaza Strip to apply additional pressure on the terror groups there. On that and more, we'll introduce now our panelists for today, to include from left to right, Colonel in Reserve, Reuven Ben Shalom, who is a cross-cultural strategist and a senior fellow at the Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University, as well as a pilot among a long list of other military positions. And next to him, Brigadier General in Reserve, Doron Gavish, formerly the commander of the Israeli Air Force Air and Missile Defense, currently the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense. It's great to see you both. And I'd like to start with you, Colonel Ben Shalom. When we're talking about the current activities in the Gaza Strip, unfortunately, the situation is as such that 59 of Israeli, including dual nationals, are still in captivity by the internationally designated terrorist organization. What can Israel do to further intensify pressure on the terror groups in the Gaza Strip?
Well, Jonathan, the strategy of the IDF, even though it was not declared exactly as this, since the beginning of the war was always starting at a certain level and then having steps of intensity, of increasing intensity. Many times this is done in order to enable the other side to do what the right thing to do is. In this issue is to release the hostages. And remember, this war could have ended long ago from that perspective. And here we're declaring very clearly that the efforts on the ground now are in order to step up the pressure so Hamas will agree to a framework to release the hostages. So the IDF is saying it very clearly. Demonstrating it, by the way, half, I would say. IDF spokesperson yesterday even told the Israeli public something like, you have to understand us when we're half veiling what we're doing. This is on purpose. This is part of the strategy. And the reason is that we don't want to tell Hamas exactly what we're going to do. It's interesting because most of the time we are telling Hamas what we're going to do. I'm not saying this is criticism. I'm saying it because we are in a very sensitive framework of course, international law, our wish to prevent harm to civilians. So many times we're going to tell the civilians where our operations are going to be so they can move out of harm's way. So altogether, I think it's very clear where we are right now, where we're certainly with a strong footprint on the ground, every day taking out senior terrorists, taking out warehouses and ammunition, but certainly far from the full-scale, intense operations that we could do. And I think that's where the IDF is pointing to and telling Hamas and telling the mediators and telling the world that if you don't move forward with the framework, we're going to just be stepping up more and more on the ground.
Well, of course, we are in an age of mass media where every phone is a shofar, so to speak, of communications, and therefore naturally, there's gonna be some type of circulating information about the different developments beyond what you specified, which is more of the concrete directives that are in line with international humanitarian law and international laws of war and conflict. But beyond that, it is quite apparent that there was a very significant shift from IDF Chief of General Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, to the assuming of command by Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, who took over and is more prone on doing things the old-fashioned way, where the art of war is the art of deception, so to speak, intensifying things without informing the public too much on what is happening in the field beyond the fog of war, of course, which is already not really giving a clear picture on the situation there. But nonetheless, General Gavish, I'd like to ask you particularly when we're talking about military objectives, beyond applying pressure to retrieve the 59 hostages, including up to 24 of them still among the living. The rest have been already murdered by Hamas and its terror affiliates. What can and should be done in order to further make those Islamist groups feel hopeless in the face of adversity?
Well, Jonathan, we already know that it's quite complicated. We are fighting for almost a year and a half, or more than a year and a half, in the Gaza Strip, and we see where are we standing. It is not because Israel didn't want it. It is because we have to remember what is the Gaza Strip, how dense is it, how challenging is it. We have to remember that we are fighting against the largest, probably tunnels constellation that militaries saw in the history. And we have to remember that we have hostages there. So it is very complicated, of course. And we have to remember also that we have civilians that are already there for all this time. So it is, as I said, very complicated from the IDF. Then from the other hand, we have to be very creative in how do we fight this war. We have to remember that it is not only about the war itself. There are pressures that are coming toward the Hamas from countries around. There are other interests that are, from this point of view, we could use it to press the Hamas. We have to remember that the Hamas is trying to rearm himself. It's not going to for him as easy as it was in the past. So it's there. It's basically using all the tools that we have in the toolbox in order to deal with the Hamas. But the challenge that we all know is that time matters. It is not a situation that we could say, okay, they are there, we take our time, we do it step by step, we do it slowly, but we'll get to our goals, because we have to remember that the hostages are there, and this is one of the main goals of our war, if not the first one. So this is really a challenging situation. Israel is shifting gears. Israel is changing its strategy as we tell.
Absolutely. Well, let's divert our attention to the northern front. Of course, while on October 7th, the Islamist Hamas launched its atrocities against Israel on the border with Gaza and deep within Israeli territory, the Iranian proxy, Hezbollah, did join by launching various projectiles from October 8th, and since then has been intensifying its various activities until April of last year, when Israel pretty much said enough is enough without saying it, doing it in other terms. Colonel Ben Shalom, Hezbollah is continuing to get pounded time and again. Israel is not relenting from enforcing the ceasefire that was reached under the previous administration through President Biden's Mideast envoy at the time, Amos Hochstein. And it seems like the parameters that have been set for Hezbollah, also after the fall of the Assad regime in neighboring Syria, have only intensified and become more and more scrutinizing.
Well, I always thought that the Lebanese arena was maybe the most optimistic, or maybe the most potential to shift to a totally different reality, where the Lebanese people will finally understand that Iran and Hezbollah have been ruining their country. There's no real dispute with Israel. It's all invented to promote their holy war, of course, serving Iran. So I thought that these understandings, and under the auspices of the Americans, the French, and others, it would immediately shift to a more positive. I still think there's a positive potential, but Hezbollah are not giving up so fast. Now, they were significantly degraded by the IDF in this war. They're trying to downplay it, but our success here was even, I would say, beyond anyone's expectations. In a way, we took away Iran's proxy that was the most significant one. October 7th was a very serious attack by Hamas, but Hezbollah was our challenging rival. They joined October 8th, but since then, we took away many of their strategic capabilities, decapitated them throughout their command, took away many of their capabilities. The pager or beeper attack is just an example. The bottom line, that were brought down seriously, yet still, of course, not defeated, not taken out, and they're trying to play it now mostly in the rhetoric arena and asserting their strength inside of Lebanon. But you can see also the forces inside of Lebanon of calling to them, hey, what are you doing? Just stop it. Even talking about disarming Hezbollah when they made it very clear that they don't plan to. As far as IDF's actions, you said IDF is pounding them. I wouldn't exactly put it that way, because we don't have now an all-out war with Hezbollah, but what we are doing is pinpoint, targeting, taking out emerging threats. And we're demonstrating that our policy now is that we're never again going to go back to the situation where we see something emerging and we don't take it out, where Hezbollah puts a tent somewhere and for months we debate it and don't do anything about it. Every terrorist, every warehouse, every action that is taken now, certainly if it contradicts the understandings reached between Israel and Lebanon, it will be acted upon. Remember also, there's the mechanism, so there's good dialogue. I'm talking about the mechanism between Israel and Lebanon under the auspices of the Americans and others, and that is working very, very well. But when something emerges, we take it out, and I think that's a good policy by the IDF, also demonstrating to others. The entire arena should understand that this is what the next years will look like as far as Israel's security strategy.
Preemption, preemption, preemption. You know, last night there was a event at Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C., during the course of which the opening remarks were given by a four-star general or retired four-star general, General Keith, the chairman of the Institute of War. And one of the things that he was remarking, it was an event specifically about Afghanistan, but he was remarking by the fact that, you know, according to the Commission of Inquiry, when we're talking about 9/11, it could have been prevented if it was preempted. And that is something that followed the 9/11 atrocities by the Al-Qaeda terrorists and their backers. Those activities of preemption have laxed over the years. So we're talking now since 2001 to date, we're seeing a lot of 24 years of activities, but this laxing is now a point of time where the United States will need to reconsider its activities when they're talking about transnational terror activities, particularly throughout the Middle East, Central Asia, and elsewhere. Unless they preempt those activities, another 9/11 can occur. And then another commission will be taken place to say how it could have been prevented. And then everything is going to go again, and unfortunately, history repeats itself too often. Israel needs to continue to preempt no matter what. General Gavish, I'd like to ask you specifically on the activities of preemption, because they're not only in Lebanon, they're also taking place in Syria. But nonetheless, there has been a limited amount of strikes in recent weeks, and the number of those type of activities are going down, including in areas where Israel has already defined them as red lines.
Well, Jonathan, first of all, to the point of prevention, I've talked about it here more than once, that when we're looking at the Israel national strategy, we didn't say it officially, but in the way that we are behaving, we are basically adding another pillar to our defense strategy, I would say, because we always talked about decisiveness, about alert, about deterrence, and about defense. And now we're talking about also the preemption, and this is for sure something that we see, that Israel is behaving accordingly. and Colonel Reuven, I think, said it rightly with regards to what is happening in Lebanon, in the balance that we are trying to be at the balance point that we are trying to be at, that we have an agreement, but then from the other side we are trying to enforce the agreement itself, and not to wait that someone else would do it for us. When it comes to Syria, I wouldn't say that we are not acting or something like this. Israel is all the time on the watch, and we have to remember that Israel is in a different deployment in the northern part today, if we compare it to where we were before the new regime in Syria, which is I'm not sure that we can call it yet a full regime, because it controls only parts of Syria and so on. So the situation there, it is very complicated. But Israel is there all the time with his new strategy. We have to remember that we have a lot of different forces, a lot of different interests: the Turks, the Russians, the Kurds, the Druze, Julani and his government, and of course the Iranians also are there. When we go, if we look to the macro level from Israel, we still have to remember that our main enemies, which are the Iranians, have a hard time to be part of what is happening in Syria, because most of the players see them as I would say, some of them as an enemy, some of them as opponents, but they can't basically behave in Syria as they were in the past, but they are still trying in all kinds of different ways. So going back to your original question, I don't think that Israel changed any strategy. Maybe it's a few days that we are busy in doing something else, but Israel is, as you like to say, Jonathan, eye on the ball also in Syria.
Very good. Well, I will mention this, and this is very simple. Everybody understands in the defense establishments, not only in Israel, but also in the United States, also in various establishments in Europe, that safe havens for terror will threaten Western civilization, be it in Israel, in EU member states, in other European states, as well as in the United States, Australia, and really across Western civilization from a cultural perspective. When we really look at the character of the Al-Jolani group, and I'm not saying just him, this Ahmad al-Shara, so-called reformed, as some may portray him, he will create a safe haven for terror and Islamist organizations in Syria as a springboard just across the border to Europe. And that is something that I am 100% sure about. I hear what they have to say. I speak their language, not only literally, but also culturally and in other angles. And if those people who have no idea about the Middle East tend to think that they can preach to us about those type of individuals and those type of organizations, well, unfortunately, it's not the case. It's purely wishful thinking. We don't have very much time left, and we still have two countries to deal with. Let's start with Yemen. Colonel Ben Shalom, the United States is continuing to intensify its various activities against the Iranian proxy Ansar Allah, or controlled, of course, by the Houthi tribe in Yemen. The last sorties were directed towards the capital Sana'a. The intentions, including the preparations of the various targeting or sorties that occurred in the last week, indicate a potential ground invasion on the Al-Hudaydah governorate and the broader district. What can you tell us about that, and to what degree is that combination between the United States military and the various tribes that oppose Ansar Allah a correct course of action from a military perspective?
Well, first, as watching this from the sidelines, because I'm not part of any official mechanism now. In the beginning, I thought, okay, the US is carrying out some strikes. It's a message, maybe taking out some capabilities. But as they progress and when I see what they're doing, they already crossed this threshold of having a significant prolonged campaign. So it looks to me like the Americans are not trying to send a message, but to create a shift, create a change on the ground from seriously degrading their capabilities when you take out a port or a serious port that deals with fuel and systematically almost every night taking out so many targets and senior leadership. This is something that means that the Americans mean business here. When you look at the entire picture of Iran and its proxies, and I talked before what we did to Hezbollah and the significance to the whole Iranian axis, I see this as part of that. So I think what the US is doing now is already creating a strategic shift in another important arm of Iran, because remember that it's not always confronting Iran directly. They attacked us directly throughout this war, but it's many times their strategy is to utilize their proxies. So they're going to have to rethink this as one by one their proxies are taken down. And the last thing that you referred to, I think this is a very wise move by the Americans. We've seen this throughout history, not always successful, by the way. You were talking before about cultural differences, engaging leadership on the ground, not always easy. But here what you see is an effort by the Americans, yes, to do it in a coordinated manner and maybe to push forward to do much more than just help Israel or save the world economy from what they're doing now to the freedom of navigation, but to even save Yemen in a way and create a strategic shift there. So I'm optimistic, even though I said many times before, this is not going to end with surrender of the Houthis. It's not going to end by taking out each and every one of their capabilities, but creating this strategic shift that ultimately will lead to a recalculation in Iran.
It can isolate the Houthis. If they push strong enough, and the tribes on the Houthi side of the tribal composition start to feel that the power is slipping in between the hands of Abdel Malik al-Houthi after he's eliminated and the people around him, they will gradually shift back to Saada governance from which they emanate, and we'll see the tribes that were identifying them as the strong men, so to speak, in that context of Yemen, will start shifting to the other tribal elements, pledging allegiance towards the other side. This has already occurred countless times across history. This is nothing new, and we are expected to see this happening at some point. But as you say, the Americans are showing seriousness about their intentions. Now, General Kavish, we don't have very much time left, as I mentioned, but nonetheless, you have stated across or throughout the Seven Front War of Israel that when it comes to Yemen, it's not necessarily about Yemen, but it's about their masters in Tehran. Now, the Iranians are negotiating with the Americans on some type of potential deal that has to do specifically with the nuclear infrastructure of the Ayatollah regime. The Americans also want to include the intercontinental ballistic missiles. The Iranians are trying to push back on that. I hope very much that the Iranians will not succeed, because this will become a threat to U.S. national security and to the security not only of the American homeland, but also to Europe. And within that context, it continues to do everything in its power to continue to deploy, in parallel, additional munitions to its various proxies across the region. What can you tell us about that? And what needs to be done to really cut off its arms and legs when it comes to its belligerence across the Middle East?
Well, we have to remember that Iran, this is a completely different story from Yemen, the Houthis, and so on. This is, within the history of the Middle East, we have to remember that the two countries that were there for quite a long time is Iran and Egypt. We all leave the other nationalities within the Mediterranean we have our historic heritage, but in general, the countries within the Middle East started with nationalism at the beginning of the previous century. So when it comes to Iran, it is really a completely different story and different way to look at it. I think that Trump talked about it, and the Trump administration is talking about it, that Iran could be hopefully a positive player in the neighborhood if they would decide that they are abandoning their nuclear program. So there is the hammer and the carrot. I think that it is there with the Iranians. I think that we have to go to the bottom line again and again and again, and remember that on this we are aligned, the United States and Israel and this is that the Iranian cannot have a nuclear capabilities. This was stated by both sides. And this is what is the interest of Israel. It could come with negotiation. It could come with the other ways, and we just basically have to wait and see, because we don't really know what exactly is happening within those conversations. Of course, we Israel would like to be very informed, and we would like to know what is happening there. We would like to influence. But I don't think that anyone have any question mark about what Israel is expecting that would come out of those conversations, and won't be in a position that it would have to take its own measures. But at the end of the day, we are all serious about it. I believe the Trump administration, and for sure the Israelis, that we cannot allow the Iranians to have nuclear weapons. And it goes back to the strategy that we talked before. We understood after 7th of October that this is a completely different ball game, and we have to act accordingly.
I think it's important to stress with unequivocal terms. In the next year, Iran will either dismantle its nuclear infrastructure willingly or unwillingly. And it's as simple as that. General Gavish, Colonel Ben Shalom, thank you very much for all of your insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.